Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Sesha Sai, retired Associate Professor of Philosophy, National College, Tiruchirappalli. The subject which we are going to read is Indian culture and the paper on Indian religion and philosophy, especially on Artha and Kama. Artha and Kama are more important in our life. Without these two, nothing can be satisfied in our life. Whether it is individual life or in society, we need both these, Artha and Kama. But these two are the means and not the end of our life. We may achieve something, but these two base principles will help us to achieve more and more at the spiritual level also. Now we are going to see the objectives of Artha and Kama. The objectives are to highlight nature of the Artha and Kama, the significance of Artha and Kama in the social life of the individual, and we are going to conclude with some concluding remarks. Artha means possession, the instrumental value which is necessary for the satisfaction of the human desires. It has got multifarious meanings and it covers almost all our aspects of life. Now, it refers to profit, it may refer to prosperity, advantage, result. In the commercial life, the business matters, business affairs, work, price, and so on. The term Artha need not be restricted to the meaning of wealth alone. Though the wealth is the most powerful and instrumental value in the satisfaction of the human wants. Artha as Dharma. To the Hindu ethical philosophers, earning Artha is itself Dharma. It is a way of life. Artha should not be earned by hook or crook methods. It should be regulated by Dharma. So, Dharma is the basis even for Artha. The usefulness of Artha is as an instrumental value is wide, for it is not confined only to secular comforts, but is also necessary for aiming at spiritual virtues and leading a moral life. Virtues are impracticable without wealth. Material possessions satisfy the ordinary life of desires in the sense Artha is the source of the whole and loss of wealth spells ruin. Therefore, wealth is important. Here I want to mention that Hindu philosophers never propagate poverty or poor. Panchatantra says poverty is worse than death. Mahabharata says poverty is a sin. And most of the philosophers, especially Bhartrihari, also says that though man possesses sense organs, same intellect, same intelligence, same capacity, without wealth, the man is nowhere. He cannot be respected. The same thing is stressed by all Hindu moral philosophers. Without wealth, nobody can achieve anything in this world. The virtues, it actually promotes virtues. If there is no wealth at all at our disposal, what we do is, we will be always thinking of amassing wealth in some way or other. Material wealth is the basic necessity of human life and it is given due importance in Hindu thought. The poet Valmiki extols that wealthy extends his friends and relations. He who has wealth is considered as a man by people. He is considered a learned man. He is lucky and he is intelligent. As I told you before, that a wealthy man, even if he does not have any education, he will be considered as a noble man, he will be considered as a knowledgeable man if he possesses wealth. In the Mahabharata highlights the importance of Artha by considering Dharma and Kama as the two limbs of Artha. The moral degradation caused by poverty is described by Bhartrihari. This is sage Maharshi Valmiki writing explaining the concept of Artha and Kama and their importance. The concept and the institution of property are dealt with by Hindu ethical philosophers. Property is divided by most Smritis in two kinds, Stavara and Jangama. Stavara is immovable property like lands, houses. Jangama means movable properties. Before that, they have also classified the Artha into three. One is white, another is spotted, another is black. White wealth means you are earning in a righteous way by educating others, by teaching, and so on. The spotted wealth, in spotted wealth, we acquire money through, that is by lending our money, and we collect the interest from the people who have actually taken loan from us, and through tillage, and at times we serve others, and then in return we get some money. So all this comes under spotted money. The last is black money, that is actually anticipated by even our forefathers, that is bribing, gambling, and involving in all sorts of corrupt ways and amassing wealth. So these three kinds, white, spotted, and black money, are also dealt with Hindu moral philosophers. And the first white money or white wealth is considered to be the best. Both kinds of properties are spoken as pledges or mortgages. We also find a threefold classification of property. One is bhu, another is gold, silver, and other movables like there is dravya, as it is called in Sanskrit. Ancient Hindu law divides property into two classes. One is joint family property and separate property. This is based on law. They say Daya Bhaga and Mitakshara. This is taken from Daya Bhaga into Mitakshara. The joint family property is either ancestral or jointly acquired with or without the aid of ancestral property, or property acquired separately but thrown into the common stock. That is, this joint family property, it is actually we gain from, or we get it from our ancestors, or we may earn and then we may give it to some trust. Ancestral property is all property inherited by a male from his father, paternal grandfather or paternal great grandfather. Nowadays we see that even here they mention about male members, but nowadays the ancestral property or parental property or the traditional property is actually shared by female members of the family also. Now this point we should note here. Separate property includes swarjita, that is, I can earn money, I can amass wealth, I can save money, and then I can give it to anybody. This concept is called a separate property. Swarjita daya. In Hindu tradition, first and foremost, the individual requires artha for fulfilling his primary obligations to support the members of his own. The second point, the individual has to take care of those who belong to three stages, ashramas in life: the initiated, the wandering mendicant, and ascetic. Here, the most important is the money which is carried by, or rather, which is saved by the family member. The man who is in a household or in a grihastha can support the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and the man who has become a sannyasi. For all the ashramas, grihastha ashrama is the best, says our Hindu philosophy. Why? Because this grihastha ashrama only supports all the remaining ashramas. So to support the other three members of the society, one needs artha. So there is nothing wrong in saving artha or earning artha to spend for others. Further, the memory of the deceased ancestors was expected to be cherished by the individual by means of periodic rituals, and certain sacrifices were also to be performed by him. Here, in Grihastha Ashrama, one should be performing various duties not only to his nearest one and dearest one, not only to his family, but also in the memory of his forefathers. That each and every year, a Hindu should perform a ritual called Shraddha. That Shraddha means it is a ritual. It means that which is done with full faith, that which is performed with Shraddha is called Shraddha. For this also we need money. So, at each and every level, to satisfy not only our desires of the family members, but also to satisfy our forefathers, we need Artha. The Hindu ethical philosophers' implication of the insistence on considering Artha as a means seems to be that if the ends for which it is sought are noble, the desires for the means is not ignorable. The Hindu philosophers have maintained that there are ethical means even with regard to the meeting of one's economic requirements in life. These aspects emphasize that acquisition of wealth should not be for gratification of one's own sensual desires, but for achieving the nobler purpose of sharing. Consideration of Artha purely as a means and never as an end itself would have seen the evolution of peaceful society, in which no individual would have thought it fit to act in a manner impairing the happiness of others. If a balanced approach to material possessions had been developed, it would have averted all social and political ills which the world at present is witnessing. So Artha should be properly earned. If it is earned by all means, then we land in trouble. That is actually, in the present day, we see a lot of things happening in and around us because of this amassing wealth through hook and crook. Artha is the means to our happiness. Happiness is a state of mind, and that it is the reason why men and women have all the conveniences that a material civilization has given them, feel frustrated and have a definite feeling that they are missing something in their lives. So whenever we are not satisfied, then the anger comes through frustration. So whenever a man is frustrated, he will feel more for it, he will long for it, and then later he will be very angry if he does not possess that. So this shows that the individual who has no wealth at all, he cannot satisfy some of his desires or some of his necessary things even in his life. So then the entire life of him will be a frustrated life. Taking of Artha, Kautilya starts with the traditional 4 divisions of basic aspirations of individuals as Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. He never says that Artha determines the forms and conditions of social and political existence. He says, as Dharma is the basis of wealth and Kama is the end of wealth, success in achieving that kind of wealth which promotes virtue, wealth, enjoyment is termed success in all Sarvartha Siddhi. This means whatever actually satisfies or helps us to achieve a particular goal, then we have achieved that particular goal. Artha and Kama, through regulation by Dharma, it leads to happiness of the individual. So this is called Sarvartha Siddhi. Chanakya, that is, now you see a picture of Chanakya or Kautilya, the man who wrote Arthashastra, which is basically on acquiring the Artha. This is entirely based on the economic and political conditions of a country, how a king should rule and how the subject should be, what are the punishments, what are the rewards should be given when a particular action is done by an individual. Next we go to Kama, and Kama is generally mistook or misunderstood by the common man, as it is referring always to the mundane pleasure. It is not so. Kama is a general term which refers to desire only. So whatever may be the desire, this is kama. Kama is not actually, it should not be interpreted as it is interpreted nowadays even by the most learned people. Kama is an integral aspect of the fourfold value scheme, that is Purushartha scheme. The desire aspect is significant as the nature of man is largely the nature of his desires. Desires generally are of two types: the desires for ordinary experience in life and those which are not powerful enough to activate man. Here, the desire is the basis, and desire to satisfy, desire to earn money, desire to come up in life, desire to achieve something. All these things, without desire, nothing can be done. Even if we have money, we cannot do anything unless otherwise we have desire to achieve something, to satisfy a particular goal. There can be referred to as the desires for the pleasures of the moment and the pleasures that are yet to be realized. So we can satisfy some of our desires, and the desire is also there, intimately connected to the mind, that has to be realized. So that which has been satisfied and that which has to be satisfied. Hindu philosophy to these different types of desires is kama. Kama is a comprehensive term which includes all desires ranging from the cravings of the flesh to the yearnings of the spirit. So it is not only bodily pleasure, it is also to satisfy the spiritual yearnings of a man. Without desire, nothing can be achieved. Kama is the central force that is responsible for propelling man into action. The uniqueness of this psychological concept of kama is that it is an inspiring force behind all human existence, all human activities, and at the same time, it is the goal of all human activities. So, without interest, without desire, without the slightest desire, we cannot move our hand, we cannot eat, we cannot satisfy our basic interests of life, or basic things that should be satisfied by us. So that is the basic desire to move. It is the desire that inspires us to move from one place to another, to achieve something, to do something in our life, to go and approach a person for something else, to satisfy our needs. For all these things, we need the desire. Without desire, nothing can be moved in this world. The term desire may, in a sense, be applied to the various purusharthas, since they drive a man to seek them. Righteousness, seeking wealth, and aiming at self-realization, dharma, artha, moksha, are all due to man's strong desires for them. As all of them are forms of desire, their difference being only in the objects desired. From the perspective of psychology, it may be stated that the only human end, purushartha, is kama, that dharma regulates and the way desires have to be satisfied and considered, and that moksha is the only an intense and unique type of longing for eternal happiness. Here, the desire to have our normal, ordinary desires to be satisfied, one point. The next thing, we may be psychologically satisfied, but if at all we want to satisfy our needs, some of the needs, then we should earn artha. So to earn wealth, to satisfy psychologically, to achieve something in life, or to achieve something spiritually also, we should have this basic desire. Without desire, we cannot do anything. And this desire also should be regulated. It should be a righteous desire. We should not, I may desire to become something, Prime Minister or a President of India or something else. For that, I should have some basis, and also I should achieve that in a righteous way. So dharma should regulate, dharma should control our desire. There are two types of desires: desires pertaining to the body and desires pertaining to the yearnings of the soul. So, physical, psychological aspect of kama offers us an insight into the sensuous side of sex itself. The psychological mental introduces us to the Hindu psychology of love and the mutual attitude of sexes. Here, whenever it comes to the point of sex, usually the kama is equated with sex. It is not so. This is the best example for the Grihastha where a male member and a female member, they come together not only for progeny, not only to gratify the basic need, but also to sacrifice, to understand mutually, mutual appreciation and mutual understanding. All these things are rolled into one in the Grihastha. So that is the basic point to be understood. It is not for satisfying only the mundane pleasure. It is for the higher level. It is for the sacrifice. In Grihastha, what we do is, it is not only for that. It is actually to perform some of the obsequies. We need this Grihastha, and we should also have the interest to do that. The moral spiritual aspects are discernible by a further consideration of the complementary relationship between the sexes, and also by analyzing the order non-sexual aspects of kama concepts, which are meaningful in the realms of arts and aesthetics. The sensual aspects of sex are elaborately treated in the Hindu classic Kama Sutra, authored by Vatsayana. He gives a systematic account of different aspects of sex life and deals with the natural stirrings of human heart. Here actually Vatsayana refers how to satisfy our desire. It is not only the bodily pleasure, it is also the pleasure of the mind. He is a very good psychologist who gives a lot of psychological satiation of desires. He has given 64 arts. Many may think that it only refers to the other side of the life, or to satisfy the mundane desire. It is not like that. He narrates what all we find in the modern days, just like beauty parlor or making some handicrafts or mat finishing. That is all this. In the 64 arts, he gives the list of 64 contains all fine arts, and then painting, drawing, drama, dance. All these are rolled into one. But unfortunately, they equate the 64 arts only to a particular aspect of life, and then they have actually misunderstood and misinterpreted the entire classic. As Kama as found in Dharmashastras and various other ethical treatises also advocate that the principle that Kama, like Artha, is a means value and not the end value, and hence that it needs to be regulated by Dharma. The lively and the colorful approaches to Kama in the Hindu tradition, we should not fail to take note of the contextual approach to sex that is equally strongly present. The motive of sexual love is not only for the begetting of children, but for the performance of obsequies of the parents, so that they might have happiness ensued for them in the life hereafter. So here, as I have already mentioned, the love between male and female, it is not only for satisfying the physiological need, but also to perform some obsequies for their parents or great-grandfathers. The contextual approach is reflected in the sections relating to the institution of marriage and progeny in Dharmashastras, the epics and Puranas. Hindu philosophers insist on every individual entering into the married state called Grihastha. Marriage thus represents, on one hand, the appreciation of the complementary nature of the relation between sexes, and on the other hand, of the mutual attraction between the sexes. The completeness of each other is attained fully because of an intimacy of body, mind and spirit. So in Grihastha only, the body, intellectual, mind and spirit, they come together so that we can lead a complete life. Without the Grihastha, nothing can be completed. So that's why Kautilya also says that Grihastha should be, the stage should be completed. Without completing the family duties and societal duties, no one should become a sannyasi directly. True human love is characterized by the readiness on the part of the individuals for absolute self-sacrifice. The Hindu philosophers pronounce that the householders is the best stage in human life. The institution of marriage has the significant function of enabling the sexes to realize personality integration through the basic medium of the sex relationship. In the ancient Hindu society, marriage, that is vivaha, is thus a socio-spiritual institution and is not regarded as an institution with a limited purpose, purely utilitarian in character. So it is the marriage system as it is, it supports the society, it supports the individual, it supports the brahmachari or the student who actually studies, the vanaprastha and the sannyasi. So the marriage as an institution is given more importance in Hindu thought. It is not just coming together and separated together as viewed in the Western society. So nowadays Western societies are also imitating us or emulating the principles of Hindu marriage system. The greater ethical and ultimate spiritual ideal envisaged even for the institution of marriage in the Hindu tradition. There seems to be logical and psychological grounds to expect that a person who is accustomed to sacrificing his own interest for the sake of his family will be quite equal to the task when it comes to sacrificing his interest for the sake of society at large. The concept of God union is drawn on the model of the perfect relationship between man and woman. Here, the sacrifice or whatever may be the virtue, it may be thousands. Virtues may be in thousands. But whatever may be the virtue, it starts only in Grihastha. So here, if a man or a woman, if they learn how to live a beautiful life or how to sacrifice oneself for others, how to increase or promote or enrich the faith in each other. So all these virtues, they are developed here only in the Grihastha. And if one learns how to sacrifice his wants for others, a man sacrifices himself for his wants for the sake of the family, and this actually we are making our children to learn the concept of sacrifice. This sacrifice, if it is actually expands, then we will be ready to sacrifice ourselves for the society, for the nation and for the world. This is a picture taken from the history of our Hindu society. Here, the right side you can see King Janaka gives away Sita to Rama in marriage. The entire family, that is marriage, how it is conducted in ancient Hindu society. The term kama not only refers to the sexual desires but also to the non-sexual desires in man. As I told you earlier, Vatsayana observes kama is the enjoyment of desired objects by the five senses assisted by the mind together with the soul. Thus the term kama refers to man's love of art and art experience. It is actually Love means it is not physical love. It is also mentioned in our ancient scriptures as love towards the society, love towards art, love towards the nature. All these they come under kama. So we can enjoy. There are more lovers of nature, and we should know, or we should cultivate the habit of loving the nature so that we can protect and preserve the nature for posterity. Vatsayana refers to 64 arts in his Kama Sutra. The uniqueness of the Hindu concept of these common enjoyments was that all of them were to be related to the spiritual goal of human existence. And so, the Hindu scheme insisted upon a regulated enjoyment. That means, whatever may be the desire, whatever we yearn in the form of wealth or land or something else, it should be regulated by dharma. Then only we can reach the highest virtue, that is moksha or self-realization. The Hindu philosopher's view is that all these arts and fine arts are the pathways to self-realization. The restricted meaning of kama as sex more specifically points to the deeper psychological implications for personality development or personality integration. The other aspects indicate the spiritual content of the desired aspect. Thus, the term kama does not merely reveal the secular aspect of the value philosophy of the ancient Hindus, but more importantly, it's related to the spiritualistic orientation of thought system itself. To conclude, are the two most important goals of human life. Although their value is treated to be extrinsic and instrumental, their absence may cause pain and agony to the social life of individuals. In a way, they are the base values which are absolutely necessary for the sustenance of society in general and individual in particular. Of course, dharma as a regulative principle controls these two instrumental values for the benefit of the society and the individual. So to make it short, artha and kama are the most important things. Without artha, nothing can be achieved, and it should be driven by desire. There is a quotation in Telugu that is, without desire, nothing can be achieved. Even to become a sannyasi, you should desire for that. Kami kanivadu, ravi kadu, kavi kadu, moksha gami kadu. That is, a man who has no desires, he can never become a poet, kavi, or ravi, he cannot shine, or he can never attain self-realization. That is moksha kami. So, this is a very popular Telugu saying, that is, kami kanivadu, kavi kadu, ravi kadu, moksha gami kadu. That is to bring out the importance of marriage system, and in Tamil there is a saying that oruvanikku oruthi, that is, each man should possess only one wife, and the female should also have only one husband. So that is the intimacy, through love, they will come together and they will have a nice happy married life, and they will definitely get a good progeny, and they will learn how to sacrifice and how to mutually love and understand each other. If not, if a man and a woman, if they don't have faith in each of them, then that family life will be ruined. Thank you.